Okay, well, it's 9 o'clock here in Perth, so I think we should start. Hello, I'm Algis Kalukas, and it's my pleasure to welcome one and all to the 16th in our free monthly virtual What Talk series. I learned the other day from ChatGPT that the acronym WHAT might actually be a kind of a thing called a backronym, as it's based on an already existing word and has several potential meanings. In my mind, what WAP stands for is waterside hypotheses / aquatic theories, but it can mean whatever you like. If nothing else, I hope it conveys the sense that there are a diversity of ideas here, a concept that whatever explains why we are so physically different from the other apes, they might all be broadly based on a waterside theme. As regulars will know, this diversity of ideas has clearly been shown in our program so far, with experts from many different fields almost always converging on a common semi-aquatic theme. And of course, our guest speaker today, Andrea Andrews, continues this trend. I sent a potted bio of Andrea out with the invite, and it's also on the website if you haven't seen it yet. But in a nutshell, Andrea herself brings together several related threads, which I hope she will talk about today. She actually began her academic journey with a degree in geology and completed her master's in hydrogeology before starting a career as an engineering geologist. As I'm sure many women would testify, a life-changing event for Andrea was becoming a mother of 2 girls. In fact, it led her to radically change careers too, and Andrea returned to work as a fully qualified swimming teacher. Even though our paths must have crossed at the Human Evolution Conference in London in 2013, I must admit I only made contact with her personally for the first time just a few years ago. This was when she kindly wrote a tribute to Elaine in my biography of her for her centenary. In it, she gives a glimpse of what I hope will be covered more fully in her talk today. Talking about the conference, she tells how David Attenborough asked her why some find the waterside ape hypothesis so viscerally unacceptable. She notes that although humans are born to swim, like otters, they need positive priming with close innate support. Andrea suggests that the presence or absence of this priming could be why Elaine's ideas feel dangerously radical to some and so resonant to others. Fascinating stuff, isn't it? So, enough of me. Let's now flip hemispheres and join Andrea in England.
All right, everybody. Well, going to be talking about the patient and emotional ape. And I'm very excited for this. Okay. Right. Yeah, so we're going to be exploring the waterside ape hypotheses and what we can glean from what I call human aquatics. And we'll be looking at the psychophysiology of humans engaging with water, because I feel that that has a really deep evolutionary roots. And there's so much information inside human aquatics that effectively we could be calling this, it's opening the door into a new world, looking at the world from a new perspective, because there is so much information. Okay, and hopefully this will encourage other curious aquatic professionals, as I call them, other people who are deeply immersed in water, who may want to share their information, their aquatic intelligence, as I call it. Ooh, wrong way, guys. All right, yes, so what is human aquatics? I consider it to be learning about natural human behavior in water, really. And this looks like a lot. There's 13 things on here, but we can't look at all of those. It's just far too much. So we're going to be looking at the dark blue, which is exploring natural forms of aquatic support structure, and identifying distractions from that in the human waterscape, and really looking at the experiential learning that happens in water, when people learn how to learn inside it, become a little bit wiser with how to work with the water rather than having to fight it all the time. And then using valuable embodiment insight of curious aquatic professionals who do the same thing. They're actually looking at what's going on inside people and sharing effective information. And then what are the barriers to that safe human learning? And also then looking at exploring the waterside ape hypotheses, using sort of discussing, hopefully we can have a chat about some of this stuff at the end. It will be really interesting to see your views on what I have to say. Yeah, so something really intriguing happens when humans get into water, and mammals actually. So I'd like to ask, let's reflect on how and why they change. There's quite significant things happen. You can see people playing here in all sorts of situations. Okay, and firstly, as a sort of a drowning prevention specialist, a professional who I work with the Life-Saving Foundation, and it's really important to take into account how modern humans are in general. And there's so much disconnection from nature and waterscapes in the landscape. And it's sad, I find that very sad, because there's a lot of natural maturation pathways, I call it. And the basic human body plan, we're born able to learn how to swim. We're born able to learn how to engage deeply with the water. But something obviously goes amiss, something goes awry. So, and some human cultures are very attuned with water, and they are using what seems to be an innate aquatic potential to thrive inside those waterscapes. But obviously, the modern world, everyone, the public water safety educators and science itself, I believe, are actually rightly occupied with a fear of number one, which is the fact that there's a lot of disconnection from the waterscape. But there's a very significant rise in interest in understanding number two and number three in order to change one. So we're trying to see what are the natural mechanisms that humans do in water, and how can we use that? How can we use that to improve what we do when we're trying to help people learn how to swim, or how to stop them going off on holidays and drowning? So the present also, as August mentioned, I come from a geological background, and one of the first things I was told was that the present actually holds some keys to the deep past. And I believe that's really significant. I think that there are a lot of internal structures in the human being which are evidence of a more aquatic phase of some kind. Okay, and then the final thing is that water actually entrains us and it draws us to it. There's a lot of interest all the time. People love to be near water, and water entrains. So how does it entrain us? It entrains us through a wonderful process that's known as interanimation. And I think this is something that's been developed by Milton Nelms and Bill Boomer, who are from the aquatics world of elite swimming. And they've developed this concept of how humans begin to interact with water once they're inside it. And I think it's a really big breakthrough. It's very powerful for the swimming world. And I think it will start to shift how people view our evolutionary past. Because interanimation, it improves the calibration inside the body of the nervous system when we spend a lot of time inside it. And it's something that it happens from babyhood to elderly people, and you can see it starting to happen. It's a form of sort of engagement with the physics of water and how to start learning from that, how to move, how to be comfortable inside it. Okay, but it's about it requires, for it to start, people have to accept that they need to learn anew and sort of start using safe exploratory methods and learn how to self-regulate on the inside, because that's what the nervous system is. All these emotions that we feel, it's where our sensorial inputs are being integrated and we're responding in various ways. So number 4, with all of these emotional experiments in water, embodied in experiences of becoming self-regulated, so emotionally comfortable to be in water, it's valuable for the person that happens to, because then they have insight to help others, or to start reading where other people's internal state is not appropriate for being in water. They can recognize discomfort and start to read what that person needs to become comfortable, or what their next step is. So this then leads on to, after lots of experimentation, is something called aquatic patience, which emerges from responding to water at the correct pace in order to survive, but also to thrive as well. It's not just about survival, because when you've got patience, you've made a choice. I am able to overcome these sensations and turn them to my advantage. Okay, and this has led to evolutionary ratcheting, I believe, where people or ancestors started to engage more deeply with the water itself for long spells. I put a question mark at the end of there, because obviously, there's so many people say, oh no, no, that's not enough. And the reason I've put 6 and 7 and then 7 and 6 is because everything to do with water, there's so much overlap with processes that go on. And obviously these more complex things, these are difficult topics to discuss. When did we become conscious of what we do in water? When did we develop speech? All of these things, it's difficult. It's difficult to see. Okay. Right. So this is a description. This is from Milton Nelms in London, in the conference I went to in Sweden. Don't be afraid of all of I spoke to Charlotte via email, and she said, there's so much information on your slides. And this is the problem as well, is that there is this world of information. But if you want to, I can always give people the run of the slides so you can read in more detail later. Basically, just look at the dark blue ones. Water starts to respond to physical bodies and movements in a generally predictable way, but not specifically predictable. It produces a sort of a suite of slightly confined new possibilities. And this requires a different mode of thinking, a different mode of approaching how you're going to decide where you are in relation to your landscape and what you're able to do. Okay, so the learner needs to keep sensing and adapting constantly. That's what the body is doing with interanimation. And these processes are deeply instinctive. No one's told us how to do it. It happens automatically. Okay, so and everyone has a signature in which the physics holds them at rest in the water. And this is a very important place because it's the sort of home safety in water that people can then use as a reference point to actually experiment with changes of moving away from that feeling of home. So when physics on the body move off of the home feeling, then there's stimulation that happens. And it's often accompanied by some nervousness or a little bit of anxiety, because the body is trying all the time to put the body back into the home position. And the water transmits these feelings of pressure and change with the speed and size of movements that are made. Because the water is a body that it moves in rhythms, and these rhythms are really informative for the body, especially for the nervous system. This is the part that's in training everyone, packets of information that the body is receiving and being able to process. So if we have a look at part of this interanimation, I call it the ancient and scientific art of floating. And when you look at these two characters, the figures, do they look to you as though they are stressed or comfortable? Okay, and they're just basically some shapes. There's no figures, there's no humans there to actually look at, but we can start to read what they're thinking about the water. But how do we know? How do we do this? It's really quite fascinating. There's just some basic symbols, basic shapes, but we're starting to read it. Okay, and this is some of the Nelms method diagrams that are used to help people understand what's happening when they're trying to learn to swim, about how to feel afloat. And you can see with the red writing of home inside the yellow circle, that's where the lungs are, and the feeling of being buoyed up by the water. This is someone who's totally relaxed and comfortable. And the one on the left here has dived to the pool floor, laid out flat on the bottom, and then folded up fast, but floppily at the waist. And they can really feel the push inside home, inside that space, because the water's going to take them up to the surface. Okay. And this is back floating, where somebody is really not very buoyant. Their legs are obviously heavier and their legs droop down. And I think this is something that people get a misconception about what floating is, that everyone's feet must be at the surface and everyone must be laying as though they're laying on a bed. That's not what happens in water. It's very individual. Some people will be floating like the person on the left-hand side with their head, just a little tiny bit of their face being able to show on the surface, whereas somebody else will be horizontal. Okay, and one of the keys to my talk is the critical nature of learning how to float vertically in the water. When people learn how to float vertically, something else is going on other than interanimation. It's a next step, if you like, in that they have actually worked out that their body needs to give some input back. Instead of just being wholly relaxed and letting the water do everything, To remain vertically upright in water, they have to engage something inside. And this is done subconsciously. They have no conscious control over it, but they can start to feel it if they listen to the body. And it's this postural balance change is very important to what I have to say later on. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Right, yes, so this is looking a little bit more closely at vertical floating and stationary floating. So obviously the water is still, and when that happens, there's less sensations coming back from the water, there's less rhythms, but the little bit that there is still informs the body. And what happens is if somebody's looking straight ahead, then they will be able to remain balanced vertically. But if they start to look up or look down, then they will tip. And that will change them back to the home float again, either on the front or on the back. So this is a very unstable form of home float physically. So we are engaging something inside automatically that is changing the situations, being able to keep us there, like standing on a flagpole at the top. Okay. Right, yeah, so this is a little slide about Milton Nelms and his wonderful work. I think it's going to change so much, but it's something that we can come back to discuss later, so don't worry about having to read it. There's too much there to read. Okay. So in answer to the question that I had earlier about using our insight, our aquatic insight, what does a stress-free float look like? How do we know? It's because we're actually reading the subtleties of the rhythms around in the body and what's happening in the water around it. And we're doing it intuitively. And the more you're around water, the more you're engaged with it, the more accurate you become at this, the more deft. It's a wonderful process. Okay, and I call it the aquatic learning loop. It's a perpetual, water basically is a perpetual playmate. It just goes on, you know, it's an endless learning that goes on. It's a lifelong thing. There's so much you can do inside water. We can choose to hold on to it and float in it, or we can choose to dive through it. There's so much to play with. Okay, and this is about the internal hidden machinery that's inside people, learning how to regulate the emotions. When emotions become regulated and people feel calm and comfortable in water, their nervous system is doubled effectively. If you look at the short parallel loops of someone who's got static fear, they're unable to gain any intuitive input from their nervous system. Their nervous system holds a lot of information and memories, but they cannot access it, of things that are of use to them. And through lateral nerve stimulation, when they're calm and comfortable again, then you get more sensory flow coming in and more intuitive innovation starts to happen through, and it becomes, this is the start of patience, where the lateral nerve inhibition, so this is where the nervous system, the vagus nerve of the freeze and flight part of it, the dorsal side, is being tempered by the opposite side, the ventral vagus nerve. The ventral vagus nerve is acting like a brake on the freeze and flight mode. And it effectively, you can see this is turned into a Mobius strip effectively, or Mobius loop, where it's double the length. And this is where intuitive insights just start appearing in water. Okay. Right. Yes, so this is about stepping back more widely now. What could have happened in the past with our ancestors on the basis of what we've just looked at? And step 1A and 1B, this is the first step. So people are interested in water. What do they do? Either they use their terrestrial mode in water situations, or they start to engage a little bit more with water as water. And then step 2 is they start looking inside at what their body is doing. It brings people's attention to the inside rather than, it's about emotions. It's about being able to control your emotional state. So that's where you're starting to look at what's happening with your nervous system. And then again, sharing your aquatic embodiment, your aquatic insight. And number 4, growing aquatic insight by sharing information with other people. And that's often, it's unspoken. It's watching someone, learning how to help them learning how to help you. Just seeing, you know, we are a social animal, and we have a social engagement system, which is very powerful. It becomes twice as powerful in water. Everyone, I don't know if you've noticed, most people become very friendly in watery situations, unless it's lane swimming. It's a whole different ball game there. Yes, so then self-agency, and this is about using that ability to be patient in water, having been instructed by it as to how to hold your emotions and gain some agency, is very powerful. And this is where I consider that there was a ratcheting step, where, if you notice, this diagram looks a little bit like a hand to me. So step 1 and A, 1B could be like a little finger, and it divides whichever way you're going to go, terrestrial or aquatic. And then the others, this is the index finger, where the ratchet is on the end here, and the thumb is on the bottom, with either you've got innate aquatic potential that you're using, or you're being dominated by the culture that you're living in. Okay, and this ratchet only happens in a few people, because it's a long old process to become primed in water adequately enough, and then to become able to go into deep water and be highly, you know, I'm talking in the modern day, obviously, you know, to be highly aquatic and just be able to play and enjoy everything, be completely free in water. So if there's only a few people, well, then maybe that's all that was needed for a few ancestors to have become highly adept. Or a situation where the water itself was just so inviting for everyone. Everyone ended up having this incredible culture of enjoyment and success in situations. Okay, so hold that thought. Well, I'm going to skip that one, it's too much. Right, so this is how some people today can feel in situations, in terrestrial situation. They're in terrestrial mode, and it's as though they can't feel their hands, can't feel their feet, feel as though they're glued to a board. So I thought it was a very excellent visual graphic of how it could feel. And this is about how we can start to help people turn to a more aquatic mode. start to be themselves. You don't have to be anyone you're not. Calming the situation down, always being reliable for them, and helping them learn to slow down and interanimate and guard their self-learning, because it's natural. It's inside all of us to be able to learn how the water works. Okay. And right, this is a slide that I will just briefly look at, because obviously it's another facet of humans. Why do we drown? If we have this innate ability to engage with water and become highly aquatic at one end, why do so many people drown? And this is effectively, we need to start by looking at what happens. So this is where we've got 3 people who are very useful for this. They've done great work. Frank Pier first coined the term of having an instinctive drowning response, and it's about they're still in terrestrial mode. People have not engaged with the water, and this happens with animals obviously as well. It's not just us. So Mario Vittoni on his website, he illustrates beautifully with a story about what happened to a little girl and a sea captain who saw her starting to drown. And it's very instructive, and I recommend, if you don't know how to recognize pre-drowning and drowning, what it looks like and sounds like, then it's really good to know. You need to look at that. It's very important. And the last person there, Luis Miguel Pascual Gomez, he is a life-saving guy who's done years of research about how to identify when someone is putting themselves at risk in a pool. And some very interesting things have come out from it about, what's innate in humans. You start to see patterns of behavior, which are very, very important. Okay, so another crucial thing about my talk is that there is a definite subconscious demand for homeostatic stability. Even, this is coming from the cellular level. As we're sitting here, our body is calculating, how much time can I spend on thinking? Andrea's put too much information in her slide. All of this is all calculating all the time. And this happens to the nth degree in water. And it explains why some people make decisions that are, where they're afraid. They've calculated that their emotional state's not ready for the situation that could crop up. So this is very important. And these homeostatic calculations, they actually form the basis of decision making, and they determine how we generate our experiences of time. So there's what are they called? Astrocytes in the brains, in the brain, that they actually are responsible for holding energy for brain cells. So you can see where the mechanism comes from now. And people are starting to understand that, when we're making decisions, we are actually still calculating from the energetic level, from the cell level. And this is something that would have been true in the evolutionary past, would it not? Okay. So yes, this is about feeling the appropriateness of your internal state. Am I likely to be safe here? These emotions are critical to be listened to in the water. Okay. And how we generate our sense of where our physical body is in space and how appropriate our internal state is, our sort of emotional state is we first of all need to build proprioception, which is an understanding, an integrated understanding of where our limbs are, where our head is, where everything is in relation to the outside world. Otherwise, we can't balance and move. So obviously, when people are put in water, they start to, especially deep water where there's no touching the sides, or you can understand they've lost their reference points. Where, you know, where's my body? Can start to really impact. And if I have no external structures to evaluate the world from, it's a huge change. Okay, so what do people do in order to interanimate naturally? And although this diagram again looks, this, guys, you know, I mean, it's an enormous world of information. I've tried to squeeze it all in it, and I've done it deliberately to try and encourage you to realize that I for a start, I couldn't choose which bits to focus on. But basically, on the left-hand side, we have attuned support. So this is, say, like a mum and baby, or a friend trying to help somebody who, you know, that they'd like to learn how to swim. And you see this all happening naturally. It is instinctive. The sort of things that people start to do, sitting on the floor with the water here, and then breathing in and out and feeling yourself lift. This is interanimation. This is engagement with the water properties, finding home and feeling the little bit of anxiety with the lift, or joy, whichever. And all of these things lead as well to independent body mapping on the right-hand side, which is where natural structures are used to actually start to sort of control the external environment so that you can experiment safely to learn how to move, learn how to just be still in the water and feel what it does to you. Okay, and there's a really crucial box at the bottom there called reducing thigmotaxis. And this is common to all animals and insects, is that there's a desire for external structures for a feeling of safety. And obviously, when we're learning in water, we gradually need to disengage ourselves from it. We need to be able to say, oh, yeah, I can feel that you're telling me that. Or, you know, and again, this is about building the patience, the internal patience, to be able to experiment enough to then start to feel it releasing, and you can end up in nice deep open water, playing happily, safely as well. But at the beginning of the process, with this blue box at the bottom here, it says feeling and stopping. That's really important as well. For a terrestrial living animal to get into water and to be happy and become more aquatic, then they need to know that they have some reliable stopping point, that they can rest. If not, then they will always move. And that's exhausting at the cellular level. And the cellular level then will say, hang on, this is going to restrict what I'm going to allow you to do. So all the time with this natural emergence of this play, this safe experimentation, anything that removes distractions from feeling safe in the water will be used. Okay, so there will be a sense of a small pool, an island, a sea, little, you know, islands and seas and lakes, emerging rocks, just all of those things that are labeled there. And all that's happening in the center there as well is that internal regulation is happening in order for the body to be able to receive the inputs. Okay. Let's skip that. All right. Yes. So this is about calmly playing with interrupted breathing. Obviously, you know, a terrestrial animal wants to be able to breathe like they do in air. Can't do that in water. We have to. This is why we needed to engage with the rhythms and the flow patterns, and change our internal state to a new reference point, a reference point of safety on the inside of the person. So there's lots of these lovely exercises that, and kids do this naturally, a lot of it. It's instinctive. One of the really good things is the calm crocodile breathing. So mouth open in the at the water surface, and you can still breathe when you've got your mouth half in the water and half out. That's really important information for people to start to feel calm. So laughing, smiling, coughing, all of these things we can do underwater. There's not much we can't do. Inhaling is a no, obviously. All right. Okay, so something that I feel is really important is about learning about water today is very much about learning how to move in it too soon. I feel our ancestors they just had a different purpose. It was more purposeful to look for food and go into environments and explore them. And I feel it was about, obviously, when you have a calm ecological purpose, as I call it today, in a pool, adults will do so much more than just focusing on themselves and learning to, trying to learn to overcome their misconceptions. So someone who perhaps has been really afraid of water, and then 2 minutes later they're underneath picking an object off the floor. It's an ecological purpose. It's distracted them from this sort of higher intellectual source of fear, and also the deep vagus nerve fear. There's something really powerful in there. It's come from our past, I think. And also it's about removing thigmotaxis slowly, isn't it? This image, because you can use those structures to adjust and in a calm way to learn how to float vertically, hanging off of something, or learning how to duck under, or under the log. All of these things, they're useful natural structures to learn. So this is some of those beautiful landscapes that look so inviting. Why do they look so inviting? You know, to me, it's a deeply embodied experience, looking at especially the one there, the thermal bath type. I'm assuming that's somewhere in Turkey. Absolutely stunning. And there's a lovely slow river as well on the right hand side, which moving water. At the moment, I had been talking at this point and about still water effectively, still water and interanimation. There's a lot of movement happens in water and it can be very distracting. But when it's a lovely crystal clear river like that, that's moving fairly slowly, there's a lot of learning can go on in there about lift, where the body will be, yes, a real natural swimming aid, actually. And that's one of my home pools, I call it, is a stunning place in Dorset, which when you think of how to interanimate here, there's lots of gentle slope of the beach where you can choose which depth you want to be in if you want to start learning to swim, start to engage with it. So if you're reading your internal state, then you can do it safely. Start to gradually do it. But of course, humans, you know, we need support when we're learning to swim. We need this. We need the backup. All right, so this is about the vagal nerve, and I'll just pick out a few things about the social engagement system. Like I was saying, people become calmer when they are together in the water, unless someone's trying to push everybody. That's no good. It's about being supportive and helping people interanimate with the water, just helping them engage with it naturally at their own pace. And there's lots of things. I mean, Erica Shagatai's fabulous talk on free diving. This is where it starts to overlap, because, you know, I'm the person who says about aquatics, you know, a change is as good as a rest, because switching to an aquatic mode is pleasurable in itself, and it does a lot to the nervous system. It changes how we need to learn. Whereas Erica's stuff is about more of the purposefulness, and it's really interesting, all of these amazing overlaps. Okay. Right, so this is the concept of the deep water ratchet, and it's about having removed this feeling of having any external structure to rely upon. And I think it's very important, and I think it doesn't emerge until somebody has vertically floated and felt a joy at being able to just feel. I can describe an event where I was basically in a beautiful outdoor pool, and the sun was baking, and it was on my top of my head, and I was just being suspended in the water vertically, playing with my brother, and I felt as though the world had changed suddenly, because there was this immense sense of freedom to be able to do whatever I wanted in the water. And this feeling of, because until that point, I'd felt a sort of an anxiety, a knot in my stomach about being in deep water. So this, it almost felt as though I was suspended from my head. I know I wasn't, you know, it was sort of, I would think the water level was probably about there. I wasn't worried about getting air. And imagine being able to stay upright in a vertical float requires an engagement of muscles, and your ears need to be working, your internal organs need to be comfortable. At the cellular level, you need to not be concerned about the amount of energy that you need. All of these things tie up to reach this state. And I thought to myself, this is very powerful for encouraging people to walk upright on land. Because until that point of feeling safe and comfortable in a vertical position, and exploring the wider waterscape with the other movements you can then start to do, like turn yourself upside down and go head first. Remembering as well that if our ancestors were wandering around in the trees, they were still afraid of falling. They were then very good at not falling off if there's, you know, something to grip onto. But if you put them somewhere high up and there was nowhere for them to sort of slow their fall on the way down, it would be a whole different ball game. So it's about this being released from the concerns of you know, gravity on land. So, and as you can see with this diagram, the ratchet, it can open up because these points of now, effectively, those are hinge points. So do I have enough fuel in the tank for the internal pace, my emotional state inside? Can I start to learn how to do fast swimming? Yes, because now I've got the energy. I know I can stop and rest in a vertical flow or a horizontal flow or however I want to, because I've gained this extra agency. I've gained this extra energy now. At the cellular level, my body has decided that it's going to free me up to learn. It's going to free me up to take energy to thrive now. So it's about the amount of time that's been experienced as well. And time is this slippery concept, isn't it? It's human generated in a way. When you look at what physicists say at the quantum level, they say time doesn't exist. It's about probabilities. So it's a really interesting concept. We can actually travel around in our minds from the past to the future. How did we start doing that on land? I don't, in water, I can understand that we could start to do it if we became so free like this. It's ultimately the patience to choose to stay and feel what's going on in the water instead of panicking and starting to drown. This is what it's about, this fundamental point of, no, I'm patient. I know that if I just press my hand down a little bit, my head will come up to the surface and I'll get some air and I can then drop down again and start playing again. I think it's an incredible ratchet that happened, and if there was a whole culture like this, I think it would have been very powerful. So I'm trying to think what I've given you guys next. Oh yeah, so changing our perception from 2 dimensions as well. The terrestrial mode of swimming is, we're worried about the surface. Where is it? All the time worried, not when you've got the freedom in water to do what you want. So no longer attached to external safety structures, keen to go beyond the 2D interface of air and water. No longer feeling trapped inside that water like an empty negative crystal, able to rest calmly, choose where to go next, when to breathe air, and how much energy to use. Because if you look at most other mammals, they cannot do this. They can't do it. So dogs very often will, even if they're very confident, will still be moving. So at the cellular level, they're having to expend energy, and that's going to be a limiter on what they can do. Okay, and this little diagram here where it says cephalic neurons, enteric neurons, and cardiac neurons, this is about how the nervous system and the neurons can all connect up into this ratchet, because if they're all going with it and saying, yeah, I'm happy, I'm comfortable, I'm calm, it's you can learn, you can move, you can do what you like. Right, so it's more words. There's a lot of words in this talk. Yeah, so what did interanimation in water bring our ancestors? I feel that they started to feel, if they were in a sort of a very comfortable home environment, I think they may have felt that they could have started to go elsewhere and try it elsewhere. And they've got all the tools to do so. Obviously, local law, aquatic law, is very personalized to the space, but you can then start again in a new environment. So I believe that the top thing that it gave us was the concept of time, and being able to, the embodied concept of time, being able to move our attention from the past to the future, and feel and manipulate a sense of internal space. So this is about, you know, the thorny thing where when does consciousness come into it? I really don't know. I mean, we could have some really interesting discussions about it. But for me, the bottom line is that the honed sense of tuned vertical balance is it's a very important factor. And again, that's important to being able to walk. What conditions did we need? And in a way, I sort of started to talk about that. As you can see, there's so much information that it's very hard to summarize it all. But I think grandparenting is another powerful thing, because you know, being in water, being able to look after yourself in water, that means if you were disabled, you could look after yourself in water as well as anyone else, which is again, that's a huge ratchet, because water, there's so much aquatic, what's the word, insight being used now to help people in rehabilitation. And obviously the Paralympics, some of the Paralympians can swim with sort of one arm and that's it, or one leg, and they can swim as fast as people with two arms and legs, and they can cope, they can rest. So yes, water is a very facilitating environment. So I find it very sad when people can't see its value in terms of evolution. I think they're missing a trick, missing the world.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That's fascinating stuff. I mean, your slides, you obviously, I can see your engineering background coming through those, because some of those slides are like manuscripts almost. They're so detailed. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Now I've got a couple of questions I want to ask, but I want to offer it to everyone else first. So if anyone's got a question or a point they want to make, I'd like you to maybe indicate that. Maybe while you're thinking, I'll just sort of rattle off my first point. I'm really interested in the floating thing. To me, one of the key, of all the smoking guns of this idea, the fact that babies are born with 5 times the adiposity of chimpanzees is the most difficult for the savannah theory to explain for me. I mean, it's of no benefit at all climbing trees. It's of no benefit at all on the open plains, but it could save a baby's life. And on Twitter the other day, I saw this amazing video of a mother throwing her baby into the pool. She dived straight in after it, so the baby was, safe, but the baby immediately floated to the surface, and not only that, but floated face up. And it just seems to me that that's really important. So I wanted to ask you, the business of the back float that you said, I kind of discovered that on my own. When we came to Australia, I learned that if I just rock my head back, and I have a lung full of air, I will naturally float face up. And it's a really empowering experience just to know that just by rocking your head back, breathing in, you can lie there forever, as long as there's no waves that are going to sort of bash you around. It's a very empowering thing and very nice feeling. But what I'm not sure about, and what I'd like to ask you about, is When does that change? I mean, if a baby will float face up, you know, more or less from birth, what stage does an individual grow to the point where they have to learn to do that back float so they can continue breathing without any hassle?
Well, it depends in the culture in which they grow up, basically, because there could be a continual line, continual thread from babyhood to where you got to, if they're in there every day.
But when you were teaching your children, do you remember what point did you become a swimming teacher with your children as they were growing up?
Yeah.
And do you remember what sort of time that would be for them? When they
for my elder daughter, it was around 6 years old, but my younger daughter, she was very competent 2.5 in deep water. But she still wasn't keen on going on her back to float on her back. She didn't need to. She was bobbing up and using everything from front. She was very eye-led. So yes, she learned a lot about frontal flotation, diving. Excuse me.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, now, who else would like to ask a question? Simon, you got your hand up.
I think I'm unmuted, am I? Can you hear me?
Yes, you are, yes.
Yes.
Very early on in your presentation, you showed a picture of a swimming chimpanzee, or it looked like it was swimming. I just wondered if you had any more information about that.
That was from Renato Bender. So yes, he did a PhD on some ape swimming. So yeah, I can give you a reference for it. And also I've seen some images of chimpanzees swimming in swimming pools, you know, where they've just had a little play, or orangutans or whatever. They do have a natural gait, and they will start to engage more deeply in the water if there's a treat at the bottom of the pool. So you can see how it could all start so easily. Yeah. But they wouldn't be able to float vertically and still, or rather not still, because you're actually, you know, your body's doing stuff on the inside which you're not aware of. But you know, to keep you vertically upright, just hanging in the water like that, why would they want to do it?
Right.
That's the interesting question, isn't it? Unless it arrives through sort of, you know, spontaneous play.
Yeah, Renato and Nicole both did their PhDs under Philip Tobias, I believe. Fascinating study, but I've still not seen the published output from that. And I wrote to Nicole and Renato to ask them if they want to give a talk, but they've not replied. Charlotte, you got your hand up. Do you want to go next?
Yes, I mean, given the sort of time span between the last ape sort of ancestors and, you know, sort of human beings as we know them, I mean, it would take that amount of time possibly to have all these things happen. But which came first? You know, I mean, it's like being upright and vertical. From that swimming ape, you know, chimpanzee that we saw, to a human being that can stand up and walk.
I think the environment is the answer to it, where the environment was very inviting and limitable. So people could choose, you know, the ancestors could choose to do what they liked in parts of the water. And then very close by was land to run about on, in and out of water, in and out, all the time, and floating vertically in deep water for short spells. yeah, I've got no problem. I can see it happening in my mind's eye. You know, I guess because I've seen so much stuff on holiday where you go various places and there's lots of interesting environments, aquatic environments that have been set up for people to use. And you can see the sort of internal aha. And it's not conscious because they move on. It's something has happened inside the body that says, ah, and that's another integration has happened. And it's about sort of, I suppose really what I'm saying is there's a sort of an internal geometry that forms based upon the body structure. Because that's how we function. We're like a calculating machine all the time. We need reference points. And the body becomes a reference point rather than the external structures. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Has anyone else got a point that they want to make or a question? The other one I had that I wanted to mention was when we were in London in 2013, I had a conversation with an Italian scientist. I can't remember his name. I don't know if anyone might know who he was, but it's frustrating because I didn't write his name down. And we were having this conversation about the idea that in water, especially when you're diving, you really have to suppress the natural instinct to breathe. And this when your talk was about the patient ape, that's what made me reminded me of that conversation. So it's kind of like internally, we've got this sort of natural suppression of instinct, and obviously it manifests itself pretty obviously when you're underwater because you can't breathe. But it just seems to me that that would be a really perfect precursor for all sorts of other human traits. You know, like we're generally, you know, I mean, obviously these days there's lots of counterexamples, but you know, we're generally moral. We're quite polite. You know, if you're hungry, you won't just grab food off someone's plate. You know, we've got this natural inhibition, which seems to be characteristic of humans. I don't know if maybe Simon, if you have any thoughts about that as well. But you know, it's just that it seems to me that an aquatic past or a more aquatic past would be a natural precursor to that human quality, which is to suppress natural instinct to do something. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
No, not at the moment.
What about you, Andrea?
Yes, as you could tell with that, the previous slide. Oh, this one comes from being able to manipulate time and space inside and be reliant on your own body. So there's a lot, there's a hell of a lot on there, and it could be packed with even more. It's yeah, when you're self-reliant, that's you know, you're no longer tethered to anything.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Has anyone else got any final points? I'm just getting a little bit concerned about the time. Does anyone like to make a final comment or ask a question? Okay, in that case, I think well, thank you very much, Andrea. It was a fascinating talk and very much along the theme of diversity and different inputs into this waterside idea. You brought all sorts of stuff in there that I'd never thought of before. So thank you very much. So thanks everyone. I'll repair the mess that I made at the beginning and do a nice video hopefully in the next couple of days, and I'll send an email out when that's ready. Next month we've got John Foss, who's going to talk about swimming. I think I get the impression from a more mechanical point of view, you know, maybe the shape of the nose and things like that. But anyway, hopefully I'll see everyone here next month for the next one. Thanks again, Andrea, and have a great day up in England.
Lovely.
Thank
you very much. Thanks for listening. Guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.